Hey, welcome to your Taurus horoscopes for the week of December 3rd through the 9th. We are moving into the shadow period of our last Mercury retrograde for the year, which starts off in Capricorn, so another earth sign, unfortunately, but ends in Sagittarius. And that means that we won't be having them in earth signs this year, which is nice. We've had them in earth signs for the last 2 years. It obviously hasn't helped us out any, so glad to see them moving on to another element. There may be a little bit of a Mercury retrograde time in Taurus, but we're talking days instead of the whole retrograde because predominantly the retrograde will be in Aries when we get to the next one. For now, we're looking at an almost full Capricorn retrograde, although it is spending the last few days, like I said, in Sagittarius. And while it's really frustrating to be beginning and ending, we began and ended the year 3 times now in a Mercury retrograde. Luckily, we're beginning 2024 with a retrograde that lasts. We're literally 2 days in, and then we're really dealing with the shadow period more than anything at the beginning of the year. So that's kind of good news. At least we're not taking up, days, even weeks into 2024 in a Mercury retrograde, because that hasn't been helpful the last couple of years. Whether you are a Capricorn or not, it affects all of us. So that's kind of the good news. But as we move into the middle of the week on the 6th, which falls on Wednesday, we are officially in that 7-day shadow period of that retrograde, which starts the following Wednesday on the 13th. So be prepared for that. We still have Uranus and Taurus Uranus and Jupiter in Taurus. Not surprising necessarily at all. Both planets are still retrograde. Also not surprising. Their retrogrades last a really long time. Although I think that Uranus's retrograde is coming to an end this month. I am pretty sure. Not 100% because I'm not looking at it, but I am pretty sure. And that grand sextile that Uranus has had with Pluto and Neptune is kind of starting to break up finally. Not that we want to say finally, because it really has been a very helpful aspect. Lots of magic going on with those three planets that don't necessarily move very quickly. Um, Unfortunately, though, with Uranus moving out of a trine with Pluto, that is starting to break it up. But we still do have Uranus in a sextile with Neptune. So we're still working very closely with our intuition and our intuitive abilities. With Uranus moving into a focus on the past and continuing to be retrograde, with Uranus being the rebellious influence that he is, retrograde is not necessarily a bad thing for a fixed earth sign like Taurus, because they can be rebellious, but that's not what Tauruses generally lead with. They prefer peace to rebellion most of the time. That doesn't mean that if you insist on poking the bear, that the bear isn't going to fight back. That's not what I'm saying. I've known a lot of Tauruses, and trust me, they are really good at standing up for things that are wrong, especially towards them or their families. So I get that. But as a rule, Tauruses like to lead a peaceful life. They don't necessarily like to fight unless there's a darn good reason for it. And that's where Uranus continuing to be in retrograde actually works out for you, because the energy that it provides is a lot easier to work with. Neptune is not retrograde anymore and very much focused on self. Now, two things about this. One, I think I might have mentioned this in one of the recordings last week, and I can't remember if it was you guys or if it was Pisces. But Neptune focused on self. Every single birth chart that I have done with Neptune in that specific place, generally indicates somebody who is an intuitive, and not just is an intuitive, but known as an intuitive. A lot of the people that I have worked with that are psychics, mediums, astrologers, etc., where I have taken a peek at their charts, I can't tell you how many of them have had Neptune in this particular placement. So I feel like there's a couple of things going on with this. One, if you have been a very intuitive person up until this time and you've been hiding it, it's time to take it out of hiding. No, not everybody is going to agree with it. No, not everybody is going to be accepting of it. But that's not the point. Again, as I said in Aries just a moment ago, we don't water ourselves down for anybody. We don't dim our light specifically because somebody doesn't want to put sunglasses on because it's too bright. This is part of stepping into not just shining that light bright, but shining it brighter than you ever have before. And I'm not saying go around and necessarily start reading palms unless that's what you want to do. What I am saying is that it's time to not be ashamed of it anymore. It is who you are, and it is time to step in to that part of yourself, if that makes sense. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it's kind of weird. Yes, it's kind of uncomfortable, but it gets less scary and weird and uncomfortable over time. Now let's move over to Jupiter, because Jupiter is the one that's really playing the games here this week. And we're going to start with Jupiter's continued opposition with Venus. Now, Venus moves into Scorpio, so of course is moving into direct opposition with Jupiter. And Venus will probably be in opposition with Jupiter for a couple of weeks. Jupiter is also retrograde, so in terms of that expansion and growth, it sort of feels like we're stunting that, especially because he's really focused on the past. But with Venus being focused on finances, we're really looking at having an issue trying to grow your finances by continuing to use the same process that just hasn't worked before. Maybe it started off working great, but then all of a sudden you keep doing the same thing and it's just not providing the same results as it did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And of course, well, we have to do that because we have to evolve with the way things are currently right now. Whether we agree with the way things are or not is irrelevant. So bottom line here is that if you're trying to do things in the same way, especially in terms of your finances that you always have, it is time to look into other options, because as we grow and evolve as a society, those things also grow and evolve as well. So the way that my grandparents dealt with their finances is not necessarily the best way for me to deal with my finances. Not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but we have different options now. And we're in a different economy now. And things cost different. We're making different money. There's a lot of factors and variables to take into consideration here. And bottom line is, if you're trying to push something to work, there's a reason why it's not working. You need to take a step back and kind of look at what the problem is so you can find a more creative solution. Outside of that difficulty, Jupiter is in a grand sextile with Mercury as well as Saturn. Now, Saturn is starting to really focus his energy on inner trauma, on the release of all of those things that you've got locked inside of you, while Mercury's focus is on career. Now, I tend to look at this with Jupiter again influencing the past and making it known that you can't change the past. What's very interesting about how these planets are lining up in the focuses that they're lining up is that in many cases, when it comes to career growth, You can't grow if you're still holding on to challenges that came up in the past. Yes, you remember when something bad happened, because remembering helps you to sort of eliminate that problem, maybe avoid that problem in the future. But it also can trigger things. It also can cause you to panic, thinking that this same thing is going to happen again. And in that panic, you have a tendency to not make good decisions. So really, Saturn is saying, hey, it's your responsibility to not let your past trauma rule your current decisions. And while it seems like that's something that actually works against you, these triggers are coming up for a reason so that you can have the opportunity to identify that there is a problem, that it's a past problem, that this past problem is basically making your decisions for you, and you want to eliminate that from happening, because your past problems, when they make your decisions for you, don't always make the right decisions. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And if you love your horoscopes, do consider sending a tip or donation through my coffee link, which is in the description. I really appreciate all the support. You guys are awesome. I'm Melissa Bruce, Heavy Metal Psychic. I will see you guys next week. And in the meantime, you guys kick some butt and have a great week.